Welcome, folks. Last on our list of brushes is going to be our pattern brush. This is going to be number 5 in our list. If you go to your brushes drop-down menu, choose new brush, there it is. There's the pattern brush. Now, interestingly enough, the pattern brush, if you don't have an object selected when you go in and create a pattern brush, nothing shows up in your pattern here, which is kind of odd. And we noticed in the list before, when these are grayed out, it's because you don't have anything selected. In order to create a pattern brush, you really need to have something created first in order for the pattern brush to work. Even though you can select it, don't know why they do that. So I'm going to create a shape here, and I'm going to make a star, and I'm going to go in and have a little bit of fun with this. I'm going to grab the star, create a new brush from the brushes drop-down menu, create a pattern brush, and click OK. Now with the pattern brush here, I'm just going to keep the standard options that we have. Stretch to fit for now. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to grab my brush tool and I'm going to paint. And you can see that the pattern brush is going to paint along beautifully and create this nice chain without distorting anything. If I do a short little pull, I get one star. If I do a long pull, it gives me several stars. If I do a really long, it curves and it seems to create a very nice pattern here without much distortion. It all looks like it flows just like you think it would. Here I've created a circle, and I can apply the pattern brush to that too. And so it's going to warp the star a little bit, but it gives me a very nice circular shape. This is really cool. Now the denim is also a pattern brush. And let's go in and double click on the pattern brush here and see how this actually works. It's like, okay, so how does this get in here and how do these actually fit into these sections to make this work? Well, let me show you how this works. When I go in and create a pattern brush, I'm going to start off with something very simple, and I'm just going to do a square. Okay, nice and simple square. So this is how it works. I'm going to create a shape, create a new brush, call it a pattern brush, and click OK. Here, it looks like these boxes are all running into each other. That's because the spacing is set at 0. I'm just going to click inside my spacing and use my up arrow to space this all out. And I'd like to have more spacing in, and you'll see that there's no preview button to check. It's just going to show you the preview. Now I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to grab my brush tool or draw a line, and I'm going to apply this. And you can see that it simply gives me that pattern brush very nicely. The curves are good, the spacing is consistent, and this is what I love about the pattern brush. It doesn't stack it all up like the scatter brush does. It actually forms to the line. If I create a shape and I apply a stroke to that, you can see that it does a beautiful job putting this around the stroke, and it keeps everything absolutely consistent. And if I go in and I round the corners too, look at that. It's like, this is crazy cool. I'm going to unwidget the corners here. I'm going to go back to this pattern brush, and we're going to apply a couple different options by double-clicking on the pattern brush thumbnail. Here, I can use the add space to fit. Well, what's actually going on here when I use the add space to fit? Well, if I add the space to fit, what this is going to do is this, when it goes around the corners, it's going to give me perfect shapes as we go around the corners. Now this may not seem like a big deal, but sometimes what happens is it'll squish the objects here in order to make them fit on the sides. And here you'll see that I have a little bit more space in between these boxes. Now if I make this bigger and bigger, you'll see that the space will stretch, and then when it allows enough room, it will then add those boxes in there. Okay? Maybe a small thing, but if I choose the stretch to fit, it's going to then stretch those boxes a bit, and so they will actually be not perfect squares like I started out. So it's a nice option to have, the add space to fit, so it's not tweaking the actual shape sizes, but you can see as we gain or lose space, it will keep them and adjust the space. Whatever you want to try, it's going to be more noticeable when you have symmetrical shapes and less so when you have freeform or more organic shapes here. The third is approximate path, and approximate path is going to go in and is going to try to adjust it based on the path. And you see this is kind of interesting here. It has actually kept the spacing and the proportions exactly the same, but you'll notice how it has forced those shapes out and they're not quite centered on the path anymore. So if I was drawing a very specific size, this could throw it off because it now no longer fits along the path. It's kind of centered here, but it's pushing along the path here. And that's all because I wanted it to approximate the path. So interesting parameters that you can go in and apply. So I've got a couple different patterns in here that I've made before, and I can apply and I can see how this all works. Now, when it comes to the star, you'll notice that it doesn't do a really good job with the way the star goes around the corners. So when you're dealing with your pattern options, you have different methods on controlling how the corners work, and you can hover over, so you can have an outer corner tile, a side tile, which is basically what they call the main run of your patterns here. You can have an inner corner, you can have a start and an end tile. Now what's interesting is you can click on the drop-down menu and you can choose from auto-generated, say, corners here. And with something like a star, it gives you different types of auto-generation here, all of which look really bizarre and crazy. Okay? So inner tiles, they do the same thing. It's basically taking and it's guessing how it's going to create these corners. Okay? So how do you create your own corners or end tiles so that you can put them in here when you have no options whatsoever from this drop-down menu? And this is something I found horribly frustrating, and I searched everywhere to find this when I was doing my book in order to find out how this works. And this is as convoluted as it comes. I've created a simple arc, and I've applied the same color as my stroke, and I've gone in and I've hot dogged the ends to give this rounded stroke, and this is what I want my corners to be. Now, I'm going to create the corner as if it's going to go up in the upper left-hand side, which is what we use as the reference, okay? Which is why I curved it this way. Curve it any other way, and it's not going to fit. So just assume that you're creating the corner for your upper left-hand side. Now, how do you get this into that brush's drop-down window corner section and say, here's what I want to use? Well, this is where it makes no sense whatsoever. With this shape created, you're going to go into your window menu and you're going to call up your pattern options. Your pattern options will be completely blank, even though you have this object selected. Click on the pattern options drop-down window and choose Make Pattern. It's going to tell you that it's been added to your swatches panel. It'll pop up in your swatches panel. Simply click OK. Don't do anything else with this other than clicking Done at the top of your screen. Don't mess with the pattern options. Don't do anything else. Don't save a copy. Click Done. Now that you've added this pattern to your swatches panel, and you may be saying, what? I know. I'm going to close the swatches panel here, and I'm going to go back and select my shape that I've applied my pattern brush to. Double-click on the pattern brush options, and now when I go in and I choose my outer corner options, you can see that that new pattern corner option shows up. And you can see how it's then going to apply that in my run here, and I click OK. I'm going to apply that new stroke to this, and that now gives me my corner options. And this may seem completely baffling, and I tried dropping and dragging and copying and pasting, and nothing worked. So you have to go through this entire step because you have to create a pattern in order to make that work. No sense whatsoever. So if you'd like to go in and do your inner corners, you can do the same thing, keeping in mind that your inner corners are going to be here, okay? And then you, of course, have your ends here, so you're going to have the start and the end right there. So this is the start, okay? That's your start there, and that's your end. So if you want to do an arrow or something, it's going to be the end, and then your start's going to be over here, which is really quite interesting. So it takes a lot of fussing and fidgeting in order to go ahead and make the pattern options work if you'd like to go in and create something with the really cool corners. I'm going to click on this denim seam, which is one of the defaults that is here in the brushes panel. I'm going to double click on this, and you can see that somebody has actually created a corner tile specific to this. They have actually gone in and they've done this. Now you can see here we have auto-centered, auto-between, auto-slice, and auto-overlap. And these are auto-generated, okay? So I'm going to show you what these look like when you're going in and you're applying it to an object like this. So here I'm going to apply the denim seam. So here you can see that it goes and it looks like it's very nicely stitched, but I just want to show you the different options here. So if I choose from the list here, do the auto between and click OK and apply that to the strokes, you can see that it does a really nice job and it kind of stretches that as it goes. If I go and I do the auto overlap, this is where it's going to go in and auto overlap the seams, kind of like this layered effect. Could be interesting in this particular case. If this was being sewn, this wouldn't be perfect. But if you ever do anything in fashion, this is one thing that can work really well. Is you want to do a zipper, you want to do stitching, you want to do overlap or go around a corner. This is where the auto-generated corners, or the auto-slice, can work really, really well. So check out the auto-generated here. If it's not what you want, then you're going to have to go through the entire process of making it, turning it into a pattern, putting it into your swatches panel, and then choosing from that and applying it here. And the only way that shows up is if this is a pattern. I know, doesn't seem like it makes any sense at all, but that's how it works. If you want to change the method of colorization, you can choose from the different methods here. And we talked about that in video number 2 of the brushes when we were creating a scatter brush on how you can actually change the color of the brush after you've created the brush without editing the brush. If you want a quick refresher on that, you can click on the light bulb and it'll show you and kind of walk through on how this is going to work right there. If not, watch video number 2 on scatter brushes and I walk through how you can go in and change the key color from your example and then be able to change the colors afterwards once you've applied this to your stroke.